just a little bit about the Chrysalis Award. We established the award in 2016 to encourage and support an emerging artist, American craft artist. The focus rotates each year among the media. It includes fiber, glass, metal, wood, ceramics, and mixed media. This year, the jurors found an absolutely compelling and amazing array of applicants. There was a clear winner, which you'll hear about later, but we also gave honorable mentions to 4 artists. This is Patrick Conlon. This is all mixed media, Brenda Stump. These are just one of the 5 that images that each artist submits in their application, and Hannah Vogel. So, the 5K award is made available to an emerging artist each year by a single JRA donor. Special thanks to Patty Young for supporting the 2019 Chrysalis Award. Last year, the award in glass went to Dean Allison, who is now starting his studio in Pittsburgh, along with his wife and 2-year-old. And we have been told that this award, this annual award, has made a huge difference in the lives of the recipients of the award. So I'd like to introduce Patty, and she will introduce James.
I am Patty Young. I'm a collector and a craft advocate, and recently affectionately termed a hybrid craft monster. I'm a past member of the JRA board, past trustee of the American Craft Council, and most recently a member of the Craft Emergency Relief Fund board. Supporting artists, their creativity, and often their arduous journey is one of my lifelong passions. It's been my honor to both fund JRA's 2019 Chrysalis Award, as well as select the medium and participate as a juror. It is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you Richard W. James and present him with the JRA's 2019 Chrysalis Award for Mixed Media. Richard is from rural Tennessee. He received his BFA from the University of Tennessee at Martin in 2001. For 8 years, he ran his own pottery studio making pots until 2010 and 2012, when he attended Indiana University as a special student to pursue his career in sculpture that culminated in a post-baccalaureate in ceramics. He worked in southern China as a summer artist in residence in 2015, and then continued his studies and earned his MFA in ceramics from the University of Kansas in 2016, culminating in his thesis exhibition. Richard lives with his wife and Barbara and 12-year-old son Oliver in Corpus Christi, where he teaches at Texas A&M as an assistant professor of sculpture and ceramics. From 2016 to 2017, Richard had a residency at the Eromont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. He spent the last several summers as artist in residence at the Archie Gray Foundation. His works have been exhibited in several shows at each residency. He's participated in numerous shows and solo exhibitions, but just to highlight a few because there are too many to mention. The Indianapolis Museum of Contemporary Art in 2013, New China from China, the Milano Art Expo in 2015, Intimate Objects at the Charlie Cummings Gallery in St. Petersburg, Florida, Baltimore Clayworks in 2016, the College of Southern Maryland, La Plata, Maryland in 2018, and the Jen de Zhang International Ceramic Fair 2018, Red Lodge Gallery, Montana 2019, and the NCECA Resident Artist Exhibit in St. Paul this current year. His awards include 2015 finalist for the 2015 National MFA Competition, 2016 Outstanding Student Achievement in Contemporary Sculpture Award from Sculpture Magazine and International Sculpture Center at Groundsford Sculpture Museum in New Jersey, the 2017 Zanesville Prize for Contemporary Ceramics finalist, and the 2018 Ceramics Monthly Emerging Artist Award. Richard says he uses clay to explore questions and issues that lay beyond the materiality and craft of the studio. Perhaps our current JRA president, Michelle Minot, said it best. We were each impressed with Richard's superb craftsmanship, but ultimately it was his unique vision and voice that captured our attention. After viewing most of the 47 applicants for this award, when we came to Richard's work, we all commented independently that he was at the top of our list. It is now my pleasure to award Richard W. James his next honor as our 2019 awardee for the James Renwick Alliance Chrysalis Award for Emerging Artists in Mixed Media. Woo!
We have just a short amount of time today, so I'm going to try to whittle this down to a clean 15 minutes and just talk about my mature body of work. Throughout the years, as you listen to her talk, I've done a lot of different things in my life. I was a potter for a long time. I was an abstract sculptor for a while. I was a painter for a while. And usually I've kind of go through those things and kind of show how I got to this point. But for today, we're just going to talk about what we call my mature body of work, starting with my thesis year at the University of Kansas. At the core of my work has always been a search for a clearer reflection about myself. Say you live in a house and you can never leave that house, and the windows in that house they're slightly tinted yellow, right? And your neighbor across the road, they live in a house and they can never leave, and their windows are slightly tinted blue, right? How do you have an honest discussion about the red car that drives down the road in between the houses, right? This is a basic tenet of Buddhism, really, to question these lenses of perceptions. And that's something that's been very important to me in my work. How I feel like I must examine these things in order to make an honest contribution to society, in order to connect with people in a real way. I must truly understand the lens that's been handed down to me, right? And I want my work to be about that. My work is an extension of my self-improvement in some way. So for me to do that, I decided to really go back to my childhood and start thinking about things, start questioning things that were handed to me at a very young stage of my life, when I was very susceptible to ideas. And I grew up in a very poor, very rural section of Tennessee, where the church was more important than the state by a long shot, right? To put this in perspective, from my father's line, like my father, his father before him, ad nauseum, I'm the first male to not have built his own house, right? But from that same line, I am only the second generation that's illiterate. They can read past the third grade education. So really not that far out of the mud, as it were, pig farm. So you can imagine the types of lessons taught to me, right? The lenses that are handed down to you that you hold in front of your face, and you see the world through those lenses, right? You make value judgments, and you make judgments of people and about yourself. And I really wanted to start questioning those things. I had been a potter at that point and making all sculpture ceramics. And there's an adage that I don't make up that is, not all personal work is good, but all good work is personal, right? So I really did make a concerted effort to make this personal from now on, right? I don't have much life left. We live in this world for a very short amount of time. There's not a lot of time for bullshit. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty. So I jumped into making figures. I'd never made them before. And we had this is a very important piece for a couple of reasons. This was the first time I had used a found object in my work. And we had an old, just incredibly heavy scale that we weighed out clay for clay batches. And I got a fancy new digital one. I said, can I have that? And they gave it to me, right? And I made a self-portrait on this. And it was about me tearing apart myself and re-sewing that back together. I'll say it's not that successful of a self-portrait. It kind of could be mistaken for me. It's not that great. To use these objects in a different way. And the scale is something that I come back to in my work quite a bit. I'll use found objects in almost all work. To use the scale was, for me, an interesting way to get at a sculpture in a new way that I had never experienced that before. You can go to a gallery and you can look at the sculpture and you can touch it if nobody's looking. And you can smell it and you can lick it probably if nobody's looking also. But you can't get a sense of like how much it weighs, its mass, right? So these skills were a new way for me to be completely honest with the viewer about what's in there. All the skills that I use are zeroed out and fixed so they work correctly. And I think this thing reads like 97 pounds, right? So by looking at that, you know that it's not a fully ceramic piece inside, and you would speculate about what that is, right? It was just a new way for me to be honest, right? Maybe a real communicator in this work in some ways. The found objects became a really important part in my work. I was drawn to dolls because I was really concerned about making personal work for the first time in my life. And because I grew up in such a rural environment, I was taught how to build houses. I was on, cutting rafter angles when I was 12, because that's just what you do. You help parents, you go out to their job site, you do that stuff. And my mother taught me how to sew as a way of surviving. Her parents taught her you make the clothes, you run to Walmart and buy new stuff, right? So we weren't that poor, and they knew that the world was going that way, but still it was just a nice thing for them to teach me. And that was something I wanted to honor and bring into the work. So working in a doll format seemed like a aha moment, where I could have the wood and the steel work and the softness of the fabric and the thread work, and then the clay starts to represent me in this trifecta. It's a material that can be hard and soft depending on its uses, how it's fired, it's decorative or it's engineering, those two things. And that was me, and that was my contribution to the work, to this personal lineage of things going forward. As you can see in my work, I have a very antagonistic relationship with religion. I grew up in a very strict Southern Baptist environment, and you will see a lot of references to religion going forward with this. I feel that I never set foot in a museum until I was 20 years old, right? All my artistic know-how comes from Calvin and Hobbes, right? And if you read books, and I say that it's kind of I'm laughing, but Calvin and Hobbes is great. There's some really strong ideas and artwork theories going on in this, and I still go back and learn from those things. But I thought, I grew up looking at these Renaissance paintings of prophets and Moses and these things in this manneristic style of work in the late Renaissance, right? And they're very flourishing. And I wanted to try to adopt that in my work, to use that as my own propaganda back against that. I wanted to question our reliance on religion by using those same movements and pacing of the work in the same way. Right? I know immigration's a topic now, but during my thesis year, there was a big immigration problem coming from, not problem, just problem politically, with immigrants trying to get into Spain, and there were people dying literally by the boatload, right? They were making rafts out of water bottles. And I was thinking of the hypocritical nature of that, of we stole it first, fair and square, you can't come in. And I taught this to cedars, and I got some actual plant matter out of the field to put those things in, because we as people, as really any carbon-based life form, wants to expand. We stay alive and we expand. It's trees, worms, people, we all have this natural tendency to do that, and I wanted to honor that in some way. Power structures are always something that's front and center with my work. And I know I said earlier that everything is about me questioning the lenses that I came through, but I don't feel like every piece has to be specifically for that. That's just something that's my greater goal, and I think about things individually through this stuff. These are two plaster busts that KU gave me when I graduated. So one was Thomas Jefferson, and the other one was a cardinal priest, and I decapitated them and put my own heads on the work in Punch and Judy. So kind of like a mall law of our country, religion, and state, And the thing about Punch and Judy is a very violent play between those two things. It's about violence, very violent. Detail. This is just a piece that we don't have time to go into today, but I left it in there. I use a lot of found quilts in my work, and being from the South, you get married, you get a quilt. You have a baby, you get a quilt. You get sick, you get a quilt. People are just always quilting, right? I'm drowning in quilts. So, which is a very Southern thing. So I started looking for these antique quilts that were ratted enough, and then something like that like speaks to the aggregate nature of the way we build our personalities. You know, when you're young, you're taking bits of that's cool, and he's cool, and she's cool, I want to be like that, and you're adding this stuff on, and you get a certain age, and you're like cutting bits out, like they're dumb, I can't believe they're like that. Until like as you get older, the shaping kind of slows down a little bit. And for me, quilts have always spoke to that to the bit, and I've always been attracted to that fabric and the juxtaposition between ceramic, as you know, is like very stiff, right? But you also know that this quilt is very soft, and you're not going to go up and start poking in the sculpture. Which, if you've ever seen my work in person, I give you the okay, it's fine to work on it. But you know that it's there, right? That difference in resistance that's happening. And quilts, I think, goes well with the ceramics. And this is, sorry, I'm trying to talk fast to keep on pace. But sometimes I don't know where, I would say like a successful piece, if I make a piece and it's finished in my studio before I pack it up and I know what it's about, that's an unsuccessful piece for me because I've answered all my questions. I didn't need anything else. These things for the most part are mirrors for me to put things out. And if it's not telling me something more about my process or the decisions I've made, if I'm not still mulling over why did I put that ridge in or why did I put that rope in the middle of his chest, as I'm going forward, like those things, I need answers to those things later on, right? And then it informs the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. And the title of this talk is In Search for a More Clear Reflection, right? And I use these sculptures as aggregate in a way to polish that mirror, right? Every work makes the mirror a little smoother, a little more clear. I can see myself a little clearer in the reflection in order to ask better articulated questions, right? The better the reflection, the better the question. The better the question, the more clear the mirror becomes, right? You get to go spiral down this hole of like getting down to the nitty gritty of like these subconscious decisions that I make, right? This piece was made at Aramont. This piece was made at Aramont. This was a piece about Bill Griffith, right? And I was at Aramont School of Arts and Crafts. If you've not been there, please go. Their motto is it changes people's lives, and it does. Every single person that goes there, they leave a different person. Cannot recommend this place enough. And I was fortunate to be a long-term artist there. Now, Bill Griffith is the person who started that residency program. And as a resident in one of these places, you have to leave a piece for the permanent collection. So for his piece, I wanted to use his likeness, the likeness of his ceramic work that he makes, and the characteristics of the residency building that I lived in to kind of work all those things together. So I seen the oak, bent it around a frame, painted the color of the resident studios, and put his vest on top. It was called the house that Bill built, right? Because he was responsible for that residency that was so crucial in my career involvement, right? It really gave me space. They believed in me, right? I didn't have a great pedigree at that time, and they took a chance on me, and I worked my ass off for them, right? And I wanted to leave this kind of as a thank you for that chance. Some pieces I don't know what I'm making, right? And then some pieces I've got a pretty good sense. And this was one of the things I kind of fell into. I had this bugboard seat. My wife found it for me. She said, "This is great." I was sitting in my studio, and I just knew that I wanted to make something. I had the opportunity for two figures on one piece, right? Some kind of communication. I wanted to say a psychologist. So I was thinking about that a bit. And I started listening and thinking to, sorry, these are out of order a bit, thinking about the Sistine Chapel, right? That connection. I was listening to this podcast about Michelangelo, and according to his thinly veiled biography, right, it was like ghostwritten by him basically, he talks about that iconic point in the Sistine Chapel, not as God giving Adam the gift of life, but as giving him the holy dictates. Don't sin, don't kill, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, do this, right? He's giving instructions. So I was thinking about that, and then I started thinking about Milgram's experiment, right? And for you guys that are not familiar with the Milgram experiment, after World War II, predictably, a lot of Nazi officers were saying, "I was just doing it because they told me to do it," right? Which is kind of a hard thing to swallow. So Milgram does experiments to test the limits of authority, right? And he had this double-blind situation where two people would come in, to be tested. One was going to be shocked, one was going to be the administrator. And the shocked person was an actor. The administrator was the one being tested, right? And each question that they got wrong, the person would increase the voltage and shock them again, right? Now, good old red-blooded, meat-eating, steak-eating Americans were brought in to do this, right? When the World War II was still fresh in the nation's mind, right? And guess what happened? They did it. And they did it again, and they did it again, and they did it again, right? There were protests. They'd say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. But the guy in the white lab coat would say, you have to, you signed up for it, right? That's it. They were willing to inflict a stranger with pain. You know, the actor was pretending to die or pretending to vomit and pretending to pass out, and they kept doing it just because some person in a white lab coat told them to, right? So if you're willing to do that for just a white lab coat, what are you going to do when it's a governor? What are you going to do when it's a political party? Certainly, what are you going to do when you think it's the creator of the universe telling you to do this stuff, right? You're probably going to do some things you never thought you'd do. Because we demonstrated in a experiment that all it takes is a white lab coat and a stranger to get you to hurt other people. This piece says that 2 minutes, we're going to go fast. This piece was made after the Las Vegas shooting. And this is one of the things, like, I know exactly what I'm doing immediately. It was made in 2 days, it was finished, right? Where the playboard was anyway. And I wanted to, you had these objects that were the staplers and the vise that were made to keep things in place, right? Made their inherent nature is to keep things the way they were, right? And I wanted to juxtapose that with a matador whose whole purpose is to dodge out of the way of danger at a moment's notice, right? And the vise offered me an opportunity to show his own demise, the toys, the guns that you love to have, because it makes you feel solidified with the United States history, right? Well, ultimately, it's the undoing of this person's, right? And it doesn't hurt that the matador is also translated literally as the killer. I'm going to skip through a few. This was a piece I got offered to be in a portrait gallery, or a portrait show, and instead of making a bust, I wanted to make a sculpture about the idea of portraiture instead. So this is a piece where I made the head, I took a picture, I photocopied it, blew it up, I traced it on the fabric, and then I embroidered the head again on the chest of it, thinking about identity, like how you make this identity. Also, the wood of this came from the historic Carteret Archie Break Foundation, which I wrote was, and it was kind of a head check to like they're throwing this stuff out, and Akio worked on this, like Volkus worked on this, Rudy Audio worked on this. They probably spilled a ton of beer on that floor, right? So I ran out to the burn pile, grabbed all stuff, and he nailed it, and I tried to make pedestals out of it because it has inherent meaning, right, to me. And that kind of tied into my idea of identity, with how was I making my identity by being a Debray? How was I making my identity by the clothes that I wear, right? And I'm getting done. I've had a lot of compliments, but I've never had a compliment as good as this poet from St. Louis. Saw the show, went home, wrote a poem, made her own shirt, came back and gave a presentation of her son, her own head, while she recited this poem about growing up. And I didn't have to explain it to her. She got it. It was really great. And here's some monkeys. Don't ask me to make animals anymore. This embroidery monkey. This is the final piece that I'm showing. This is the final large piece of it that I showed at NCL last year with the Archie Bray show. And if you get at a certain level with eye level with the piece, you can see your eye through a mirror, mirror back to your eye, but you have to be eye level with the person. So that was part of it. That was part of it was talking homunculus little man, right, that lives inside of you, and these little personalities that are telling you what to do. But for more personal amusement, I wanted to make this and sit off in the corner with the beer and see how many people could keep from looking at themselves while they're looking at the piece, checking their hair to the opening. Like, that was the experiment for me. That's what I got out of that, watching that from a corner. Yeah, and I went into, it's probably, I'm going to end kind of on that note, where I would say, like, it's easy to talk about this stuff now because I've been away from it for a little bit, but for me, making work is not about illustrating an idea, right? It's about finding myself through the work. And I don't know how to talk about that completely yet. It's only 6 months old. So it takes a while. It's easy to talk about things once you live with them for a bit. So that's I'll always end, whatever art stuff you see me on, I'll end with a new piece and I won't have anything to say about it. So I hope that me staying out of its narrative will also allow other people easier access into that world and bring their own narrative to it. Thank you, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
Sewing quilts after when you're fitting them to your sculptures.
I find the quilts, but I do all the sewing.
Not
Yes.
your wife.
No, I do everything out there. Yeah. I actually loom my own fabric also when I have time, but that's later.
Other questions?
I'm actually a student at CSM. When you mentioned that you had done a gallery there, so I actually saw it. It was really cool to see. So I just wanted to comment on that. I don't actually have a question.
Where's CSM?
It's in La
What is
Plata,
CSM?
College of Southern Maryland. It's in La Plata, like an hour or so.
Oh, that was with the collective show?
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Are there other questions?
So a question for Richard. Do you sort of haunt junkyards, or what's your source for all this stuff?
Tax write-off too. I go to the antique store. Usually, we'll just go antique or like metal junkyard's a really great place because you can buy stuff like scrap prices. That boat motor I paid like $3 for, and it weighs 140 pounds. I keep a wall of antiques in my studio, and I'll probably pull 2 or 3 out on deck just kind of think about those a little bit, and I usually pick an idea. I'm usually like 4 or 5 ideas back in my sculptures. I'm still 3 behind right now, but as I'm working on this one sculpture, those objects are in my periphery all the time. I'm thinking about those things. I'm thinking about what I'm reading at the time. I'm thinking about what I'm thinking at the time, or seeing in the news. And those things kind of, I don't have a formula about how that goes together. Oftentimes I will pick up an object I really like, I know what I'm going to do with it, and then halfway through the sculpture I'll change the nature of the sculpture, and then a quarter way through I'll change the way the object out also. So it kind of flows in and out. And I always have a stockpile of those things just on the wall, I think. But recently my wife's kind of taken that over, which has been really good for us. She doesn't do the sewing, but she'll go antiquing for me, and that's been a really good way for us to connect. It's hard to get into somebody's studio, really. So her doing the antique hunting has brought us together a little bit about the practice as a whole.
I have a follow-up question with that. Try for the lifesaver. Do you have an object that you've always wanted to use that kind of is haunting you, that you carry around with you, and you want to use it, but you're afraid to use it?
Yes, I do actually. I have a World War II antique prosthetic leg. I turn the corner at this store, it's like, I'm having that. Whatever they're charging, I'm paying for that thing. And yes, I've tried to put it in multiple pieces, right? And it's like, that object every object has its life, right? And has its intended meanings. And I think that's an access to my work anyway, for people. Like, they have past memories and experiences with these pieces, and they bring their own stuff into that. But that antique leg is too powerful, right? I've tried to use it 2 or 3 times now, and I cannot get my head around that. It's like it deserves to be on a pedestal by itself. Oh, I can only make it worse, really. And I haven't figured out a way to honor that thing in the way that it needs to be honored yet. So I've been carrying that dude around for like 4 or 5 years now. And I was in the Gatlinburg fire, and I ran up and grabbed my tools, and that prosthetic leg ran into my truck. Well, yeah, that's a good one. I may never use it. It makes me amuse that I keep in the studio.
question is, all of the faces that you have, that we saw, were people in pain, anguish, unhappy looking. Can you, or why no happy looking people?
I don't like, I'm not trying to make Verklimp's pain-ridden people. I'd rather be in this, that's a little beatific, a little angsty, I guess I suppose. Doug Jeck once said, I was listening to him give a workshop, and he once said that if you can describe what's going on in your face in a sentence, it's not very good, right? It should take a paragraph to really talk about. If it takes 2 pages, even better, right? So what I'm always shying away from is like one, this person's happy, this person's sad, right? I want a complex range of emotions in there in some ways. So I'm always like, I don't know, that's something I'm working on. Like, there's no answer to that really yet. Not that they're all sad. They're a little, I mean, I think they're concerned, you know, because I'm concerned. Those things come through, I think. You know, you still have to type. Yeah. I am what I am.
I have an actual question now. For both of you, as an artist, as a ceramics artist, I know what I like to do. I like to work with wood and imitate nature, but I struggle to find my voice. How do you guys find your voice as an artist?
We didn't get to see the full artist talk today because it is 15 minutes to do that. If you have, you would have seen a lot of different bodies of work, right? And I've tried on a lot of different things. And I think if you're a student, especially you're young, or you've got the energy to burn, you try to change everything you possibly can change. And you'll start to find out there are things you can't change. I'm going to work as much as I can. These things keep showing up despite my best effort, right? And those things that stick around, that grog that won't go away, that's you. That's your foundation. Those are the blocks that you start building back up off of, I think. Don't chase an aesthetic, right? It's a scientific method. You take away all variables. Do you find what doesn't go away? And then that's you. That's your voice. Then you start developing that voice going forward. Does that make sense? Okay. That's for me anyway. Your work, just like artist talks, are like a sourdough starter, right? You get a little bit, you add a little bit, you take away a little bit. As long as that core thing will keep things growing, right? You may add it, flavoring, take away flavoring, or whatever. It's good for it. Right? The students has this insane pressure to be amateur artists when they're sophomore. Like, you have answers for everything. Like, no, I don't have answers. I wouldn't be at school if I had answers for all this stuff, right? Don't get bogged down in that stuff, right? This is art is a process, not a product. We talk about this stuff, we talk about these things I'm looking at. That is a byproduct. I had a professor one time, because I don't want to take credit for this. It's like, imagine you whittling a stick, right? And you're really bad at the beginning, and it's chunky, and you're like knots, and things are falling off. And as you get older, you get better at whittling a stick, right? And you whittle, and then all of a sudden, there's these nice, beautiful curls that are falling up, and they're falling around your feet, right? Your work is not the stick, right? The stick is you. Your work are these curls that are coming off that stick. And the beautiful curls that fall off there cover up all the crappy work of before, right? But it's a beautiful process, right? And when people walk up and all they see is this beautiful thing and how what your emotions are and stuff, but the base of that's much crappy work. So that's how you should, I think, go forward thinking about this. You're working on this, or you're working on this, or you're working on this. This is just the carbon copy receipt of it, in a way, right? Not to belittle your work, but that's just like how I think about this stuff. Those things are like silly putty on the Sunday funny things. You put off, you got the exact thing. Cartoons,